Kevin McCarthy's path to becoming Speaker is even more complicated today, leading some Republicans to consider what they call the doomsday scenario. By that, they mean a plan B if it becomes clear McCarthy cannot win. McCarthy, though, tells CNN, quote, "I'll never leave," vowing to get the 218 votes he needs to be Speaker. This as a group of Republicans lay out a list of demands they want McCarthy to meet, anyone to meet, in order to get their votes. CNN's Melanie Zanona keeping track of this live for us up on Capitol Hill. Mel, the math problem persists.
It persists, and Kevin McCarthy has a lot of work to do. So in addition to those 5 House Republicans that have already vowed to publicly oppose Kevin McCarthy on the House floor, now we have this group of 7 new Republicans who are laying out their conditions in order to win their Speaker vote. Even though they don't name Kevin McCarthy by name, it is very clear that this is directly squarely at him. And some of their demands include a promise to put more conservatives on key committees, a promise of leadership not to play in primaries, and a promise to restore this process that would allow any single member to force a vote on deposing the sitting Speaker. That is something that Kevin McCarthy has been adamantly against. But Manu Raju and I are hearing that McCarthy might be willing to negotiate as he's struggling to get the 218 votes for Speaker. And he is certainly in negotiating mode right now. Take a listen to what he said on Fox News earlier today.
I think what's happening right now is negotiations, that people want to see certain changes, and we're working through that. And we'll get there. And if we can't come together on that opening day, no investigations, no subpoenas, no repealing 87,000 IRS agents, no becoming energy independent, no securing the border. I think that's more important than sitting and squabbling with one another.
Now, even though McCarthy and his allies are still confident that he can get 218 votes on the first round, some Republicans are starting to quietly game out what the next steps would be if they'd go into multiple ballots. That's something that hasn't happened since 1923. You have some Republicans vowing to keep fighting it out, but other Republicans are now vowing that they're willing to work with Democrats to potentially elect a candidate who would be a more Republican bipartisan consensus Speaker. So it's still a long shot idea, but the fact that it's even being discussed really shows the uncertainty hanging over the Speaker's race, John.
Wild. Volatility continues. Melanie Zanona, appreciate kicking that conversation off from Capitol Hill. Let's bring the conversation in the room. Not since 1923 has a Speaker's race gone to multiple ballots. That Kevin McCarthy is on Fox about every other hour, which is part of his negotiation. I mean, it's just the way it is. And that's where you go if you want to speak to his crowd. As Mel just noted, willing to negotiate even essentially his authority, meaning any one member could raise up any day, twice a day if you feel like it, and say, let's have a vote to depose the Speaker. He's negotiating, you would have to argue, from a position of weakness, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that he does not have the votes, and it's really not clear if he will have the votes come January. I mean, it's also, I think, notable that this is all happening after they won the House, albeit not by the margins that they wanted, but he traveled the country, he raised a lot of money, and yet he still does not have the votes. And so it's clear that he's meeting with hardline conservatives and that he's going to have to make concessions. But the question of whether he gives them this ask about the motion to vacate, where essentially it challenges his authority, and this is what happened with Speaker Boehner, where any single member could challenge his authority. He has said that's a red line for him. But the fact that there are still these discussions that that's still a key demand, I think, is a storyline that we're going to watch play out.
And I said he's negotiating from a position of weakness, and yet he's the strongest candidate. He has way more votes than anybody else, which has to be said. He's closer to 218 or whatever it takes if there's a few parliamentary or people go missing for a day, and you lower the count. But all the Democrats are going to show up. All the Democrats are going to show up because they sense this Republican unpredictability and weakness. And so they're going to do so. Don Bacon, who's a more centrist Republican from Nebraska, who's on Team McCarthy, says to the hardliners, if you keep messing with us, maybe we do have to come up with a plan B, but you won't like it.
Well, I've been public that if a small group refuses to play ball and be part of the team that will work across the aisle to find an agreeable Republican, but I hope we don't get there.
Yeah.
You cover Capitol Hill for a long time. Mm-hmm. Again, you got to go back to 1923 to go multiple ballots. But just the idea that, so there you have a centrist Republican saying, okay, hardliners, keep messing with us and we'll work with the Democrats. Really?
I mean, what other opportunity do they have? What other choice would they have if Kevin McCarthy can't get all of the votes? Now, you could argue that maybe it could be a Steve Scalise, his number 2, who has been very notably quiet during all of this, very notably quiet. You could also argue maybe that an Elise Stefanik could do it, although with Donald Trump, her biggest benefactor right now, political supporter right now, in a very weak position. Unclear if that would happen. We have to remember that unlike every other leadership position, the Speaker of the House is a constitutional one, which means that the votes we're talking about happen on the floor, and they happen among every single member. It's not just a party vote. So that's why the threat of, okay, we'll bring in a more moderate Republican that we can get Democratic votes for isn't that far-fetched if McCarthy goes down.
And I mean, Nancy Pelosi navigated this. It was messy at times, but she was able to navigate for 2 years a very narrow majority. The question is, can Kevin McCarthy do that when he's not yet the leader? And some of these are congressmen-elect or congresswomen-elect who just won by the Republicans. But first you have seven who say, we want concessions. They want this. They say they want this of anyone who would be speaker. As I said, no leadership involvement in primaries, restoring so you could vacate the chair, more conservatives on key committees, 72 hours to read a bill before it votes. So there's those 7 demanding that, and that's part of their demands right there. And then you have 5 more who have said, we will not vote for Kevin McCarthy under any circumstances. Now, there's 1 or 2 of them in there that Team McCarthy thinks they can get, possibly, with negotiations. Maybe it's a committee assignment, maybe it's some other concession. But that's 12. That's 12 for a guy who can only lose 3 or 4.
And it's not just the concessions, but also just the different ways that he's already trying to incentivize the Republicans to come together here. That includes floating out, look, we have a plan to bring Ali Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, to Congress. That happens more effectively if we're unified here. That also includes establishing a committee to focus on competing with China, talking about also kicking Democratic lawmakers off of committees. Already we're starting to see in these negotiations real concessions here and incentives that also could have a real impact on the congressional outlook in the months to come.
His problem there is any Republican can promise that. Once they have the power, any Republican can do those things.
Yep.
When he talks about cutting spending or doing things at the border, you have a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate. Republicans can shut down the government if they want. They can hold lines if they want, but they can't do anything either. I mean, yes, they can say, Mr. President, you can't do much, but nor can the Republicans. On the policy stuff, he doesn't have that long of a leash to promise things.
Yeah, I mean, you think it is that there's gridlock now, actually, given what we've seen over the past couple of months. It's relatively speaking to where we've been over the past 10 years. It hasn't been as bad. I mean, grinding halt is how we would have to describe Congress if that happens.